We have seen what Aurobindo is telling us, that let us look existence in the face if our aim is to arrive at a right solution. And wanting to see existence in the face is to really not to separate world existence from the divine. Because that has been the tendency of all religions, to somehow separate the world and the divine, normally what they call God in whatever name, to make God more attractive, saying that God is all merciful and all beauty and all good and all justice and all this, so that human beings get attracted to God. Because if we say that God is also the one who has created the same suffering, normal man is not attracted. He says, how can God create this suffering and at the same time be blissful and merciful? So this kind of a Vedantic philosophy is difficult for the common human beings to accept. So it's very convenient to say God is this, Satan is this, God is this, devil is this. So we have to run away from devil and go towards God. It was a very simplistic, in fact, division to separate God and world existence. And here he says, as if man had created the law of death and devouring in the animal world, or the tremendous process by which nature creates indeed and preserves, but in the same step and by the same inextricable action slays and destroys. You see, if we human beings find it difficult to accept a God who creates and destroys, then Sri Aurobindo says, look at nature, look at the animal world, where there is no philosophy, no religion. But we see both of these happening simultaneously, that one who preserves is also the destroyer. I mean, it's really easy to see this when we see a young deer of a few weeks old being attacked by a tiger. We feel so much sympathy. Look, it's a little child, a small deer, he can't even run, and then he's being attacked. So we feel kind of a moral sympathy for the animal, saying that how cruel is the tiger that is attacking a small deer. So, but that law is not there, and the same thing happens in nature. It is the same nature which preserves also. It finds so many ways and methods. You see, the deer that is born, within a few minutes it can start walking, and within a few hours it can start running. That's not the case with the human beings. So the same nature has provided to the same animal the ways and means of self-preservation. It can run, it can hide, it can do that. It cannot outrun a tiger, that's true. But you see, it has speeded up its own evolution so that it can at least go with its own group. You see, even we see a lot of times that elephants always move in groups. And if the baby elephant within an hour or so or a few minutes, if it cannot walk, the whole group of elephants are not going to wait for the mother and the baby to catch up. But nature has given the talent and the great force to this baby elephant that within minutes it can be on its feet, and in an hour or so it can start walking with its mother, and the whole group is together. Because being together is a natural protection for a baby elephant. I mean, here we see not only the mother elephant protects, but the whole group protects this small baby. So there is that group instinct is there. So what would you call that? That's again a boon given by nature to that baby elephant so that it can survive. So in nature both of these are there. So if nature can do this, then on the higher level, what Sri Aurobindo wants to tell us, the same divine who preserves and who destroys It is only a few religions which have had the courage to say without any reserve, like the Indian, that this enigmatic world power is one deity, one trinity, to lift up the image of the force that acts in the world in the figure not only of the beneficent Durga, but of the terrible Kali in a blood-stained dance of destruction, and to say, this too is the mother. This also know to be God. This too, if thou hast the strength, adore. So, Indian Hindu religion is extraordinary, if not anything else, at least for this realistic understanding of the divine. At one side we have Durga, the other side Kali. And Kali, those who have seen her temple and her image and her photograph at least, you see that terrible lolling tongue with a garland of skulls, dancing with wild hair. So it's terrible. But if we have the strength, adore. People will run away from this Kali and go to Durga, who is all beautiful and all beneficent and looking so wonderful. So it is a kind of a cowardice in us, in the human being, not to accept time the destroyer. So this is the two facets of the divine, the destroyer and the creator. So he says, the Hindu religion is perhaps the only one which has had the courage to see without any reserve, to see that both the faces are the faces of the divine. So we do not have this question of the Satan here. There is no devil here in our Hindu religion, Hindu philosophy. Religion, I'm still saying differently, because later on some people have really started kind of this religious attitude. No, this is a shaitan is there, this is there, pishacha, etc. But philosophically and metaphysically and in the original Vedanta, we don't have these concepts of the Satan and the devil, etc. It is one Brahman. So we have realized the different aspects of the Brahman. And it is significant that the religion which has had this unflinching honesty and tremendous courage has succeeded in creating a profound and widespread spirituality such as no other can parallel. For truth is the foundation of real spirituality, and courage is its soul. Tasyai satyam ayatanam. So this is, truth is the foundation of real spirituality. So truth means seeing truth with your bare eyes, not hiding it, saying, no, this cannot be the divine, only that is the divine. And of course, spirituality means courage. That you should be able to see both aspects and all aspects of the divine unflinchingly with great courage. And here he would say that this is significant, that the religion which has had this unflinching honesty and tremendous courage, because of this honesty and courage, that Indian spirituality has withstood for so many centuries. And it's because of this vision of truth in its totality that now the world is looking towards India, because it has had the total vision. You see, we do not have in Christian religion or in Islam the Shakti aspect. They have only the Purusha aspect. They have either the Muhammad or the Christ or the Trinity. But where is the Shakti? So in India we have had this equally, of course not in the times of the Vedas and the Vedanta, but subsequently, thanks to Tantra, we have the Shakti aspect, the power, the force. So we have this aspect of Purusha and Prakriti. And again, this makes a completion of the vision. So you see, now the West is realizing that they have fought so much for empowerment of women, but their own religion doesn't have the power of women, empowerment of a Shakti, of a force. So they see in India, there is this fullness of the divine concept, that both the Purusha and Prakriti, the Ishvara and Ishwari, the consciousness and force, this is the combination of the divine. So this makes the fullness of the concept, just as the preserver and the destroyer is also the same concept. So this is why he would say that it has created a profound and widespread spirituality such as no other can parallel. Well, as we go along, we will see how this becomes more and more important. And in my recent visits abroad, I have seen there is, because of this insufficiency of the religious ideal, that there is no female aspect in the divine. Now in the West also they are slowly bringing out the Virgin Mary as the divine female energy aspect. And I have seen in many churches, Christ is there, but somewhere close by there is also the Virgin Mary. So slowly the importance of the Virgin Mary, that means the female aspect of the divine, is being looked into. I've seen in Germany quite many churches are now bringing out. In fact, there are some places where there's a black virgin, there's a white virgin, whatever. There's a black virgin and white virgin is again similar to our own Diti and Aditi. We have the same concept of Aditi is the white divine Shakti and Diti is the black divine mother. So these concepts that we have had ancient times, they're now coming up in the West slowly because they see that it is important for the development of human consciousness that there must be the Shakti and the power. Otherwise the whole thing was male dominated because there was only the Purusha dominant. But now when we see the reality of the Shakti, then what the West fought for, the women's liberation or empowerment, we have had this in our religion long back, in our Hindu thought. So, we called our ladies Devis and made pujas of the goddesses and all that. So there is this totality of the concept, and that's where Sri Aurobindo would say that that is a spirituality quite unparalleled on earth. The last para, the concluding one. All this is not to say that strife and destruction are the alpha and omega of existence. That harmony is not greater than war. Love more the manifest divine than death. Or that we must not move towards the replacement of physical force by soul force, of war by peace, of strife by union, of devouring by love, of egoism by universality, of death by immortal life. God is not only the destroyer, but the friend of creatures. Not only the cosmic trinity, but the transcendent. The terrible Kali is also the loving and beneficent mother. The Lord of Kurukshetra is the divine comrade and charioteer, the attractor of beings, incarnate Krishna. So in the concluding paragraph is now giving us a summary. Although war and strife are principal things, but it doesn't mean that they must rule our life. We have to accept that like we have accepted death, we have accepted disease and sickness and ailments and pain and sorrow. So like that, one more principle of human life is war and strife. But that does not mean that we really start worshipping war, following war, and that we should be eternally sick and we should not have the good health. Not at all. But what we have done in this survey of this chapter is that we have realized that we are not fought shy to say the war is also a principle of existence. But at the same time, it is not the ultimate principle. It is there as a part of evolution now, at this stage. Just as all these principles are a part of the evolution at present. Sorrow and suffering and pain and war are part of this level of the mental consciousness. But when evolution goes beyond this mental consciousness, then war will go, pain will go, suffering will go, including death. So we have to understand that this is harmony is obviously greater than war, love is greater than hatred, and all this will manifest in the future, and he would say, God is not only the destroyer but the friend of creatures. So the same Sri Krishna who appears to Arjuna as time the destroyer is also the one who is Arjuna's greatest friend. So there is also this other aspect, the beneficent friend, what we saw Durga and Kali. So he says he is also the friend of human creatures, not only the cosmic trinity but the transcendent. He is not only the cosmic trinity of this world, of the triple worlds, but he is the Purushottama. He is not only Kshara and Akshara, but he is himself the Purushottama, who is beyond this struggle and the war and strife. And then the Lord of Kurukshetra is the divine comrade and charioteer. So the one who is guiding this entire Kurukshetra is also the one who is helping Arjuna in the same war to win this Kurukshetra. So he is the same Lord who is seen here as war and strife, but is the same divine sitting within us who is guiding our life through these horrors and pains of this existence of war and strife, etc. So what Sri Aurobindo is telling us is that do not go that this war and strife are the ultimate principles. They are the realistic principles, but there is also the divine on the other side who is very close to you, very personal to you, guiding you in everything. And whithersoever he is driving through all the strife and clash and confusion, to whatever goal or Godhead he may be attracting us, it is no doubt of that, to some transcendence of all these aspects upon which we have been so firmly insisting. So this is the real philosophy of evolution. That God, the divine, is really guiding us, taking us through a process of evolution, and obviously and surely this evolution is going to take us towards a kind of transcendence, that means going beyond this war and suffering and pain and all the dukkha. So he said that is the finale, the aim of the divine's evolution. But where, how, with what kind of transcendence, under what conditions, this we have to discover. And to discover it, the first necessity is to see the world as it is, to observe and value rightly his action as it reveals itself as at the start and now. Afterwards, the way and the goal will better reveal themselves. We must acknowledge Kurukshetra. We must submit to the law of life by death before we can find our way to the life immortal. We must open our eyes with a less appalled gaze than Arjuna's to the vision of our Lord of time and death, and cease to deny, hate, or recoil from the universal destroyer. Well, that was the concluding sentence. As you have seen in the last sentence, it says, we must acknowledge Kurukshetra. We must submit to the law of life by death before we can find our way to life immortal. In another passage, some other book, he would say, first we must acknowledge Rudra, pay our homage to Rudra, then only we can worship Shiva. So the passage to Shiva is through Rudra. Rudra is the god of destruction and all this, and Shiva is the god of peace, who benevolent gives you boons. So humanity is at present paying homage to Rudra. That is the natural evolution. Because of our own present consciousness, we cannot straight leap to Shiva and say, oh Shiva, give me your boons. Humanity has to pass through this Kurukshetra, pass through the law of life by death. And this is where he would say that we must be more realistic than Arjuna and not be baffled by this time the destroyer, but we must also see that there is the other greater person. But here, although we have completed this chapter, I would like to add a couple of thoughts regarding the same Kurukshetra from another writing of Sri Aurobindo. Some of you may have got this book. This is the volume called Bengali Writings, Translations. He has given from another aspect. We have seen here war and strife of Kurukshetra as the principle of life. But here we see the principle of Kurukshetra itself, the war Kurukshetra, why it was necessitated. So then if I can juxtapose these two, you will understand better. So it's a kind of an explanation of this chapter. I'm going to read out another small passage, and that will give you on the practical side the total vision of Kurukshetra. All the arguments of Arjuna were set forth with a view to the interests of the clan. Thoughts about the good of the nation had been effaced from his mind by the force of personal affection. He had forgotten about the good of India in considering the good of the Kuru family. He was preparing to throw away the right law for fear of unrighteousness. You see, the background here is like this. Aurobindo would tell us, that human beings or human society goes through different stages of evolution, and these stages are the individual, the family, the clan, the nation, and the human collectivity. Individual, family, clan, nation, and human collectivity. These are the 5 levels of evolution of human society in every country, whichever it may be. Some may be slow, some may be fast. In fact, this is the whole central theme of the human cycle, those who have not read that. So it says every society or the individual also passes through the same phases of evolution. And here, at the time of Kurukshetra, the evolution had come to the level of the clan. You see, that's where there's the Kuru clan, the Pandava clan, this clan, they were all clans. They were not empires, they were not nations. So India was divided into hundreds and hundreds of clans. In fact, they thought themselves to be nations, but they were all clans. Because at that time, the clan was so predominant that they called themselves a desha, a nation, because they thought the Kuru clan is the India, is the Bharat. Because at that time, the nation idea was not there. I mean, that big idea of this vast Akhanda Bharat was not there. It was only a clan. So, this Pandavas and Kauravas, and especially the Kauravas, were very strongly clan-minded, and they were not ready to go beyond. And Sri Aurobindo explains here that one of the chief functions of Sri Krishna as a politician, as a king, was to take India to the next level of evolution. That means from the clan to the nation. So Sri Krishna was one of the first one, not one, is the first one, to bring about one Bharat in the same idea of the nation that we have today. So he sort of implanted that notion then. So he was not only, when we say that yada yada he dharmasya glanir bhavatu, it's not just the ignorance and the inconscience that really comes, adharma comes in, that Sri Krishna wanted a new law of a consciousness. But on the social, physical level itself, the new law that he wanted to establish was the law of nationhood. So you see, the first attempt, thousands of years back, at a nation was there, a contribution by Sri Krishna. And for that purpose, it was necessitated that these clans must be brought together and erased. Erased, destroyed, because exactly you see a beautiful explanation what happened in the second war. The same thing, Sri Aurobindo says, nature did the same thing to the world in the Second War, wherein nations got stuck, where there was a demand of the next step in evolution, of the human unity, of the world unity, but these nations got so much stuck that nature brought them together in the facet of a war, and at one go, within a few years, it demolished the ego of the nations. And then was given birth to the idea of human unity, of United Nations, of League of Nations, and all that and all that. So exactly the same thing happened long before, during the time of the Kurukshetra. The clans were brought together, they were destroyed, so that India as a Bharat nation could be born. Not many would know this facet which Sri Aurobindo has revealed to us. And I see is a perfect example in our own contemporary history, so we can understand what Sri Aurobindo means by this, the level of clans to be destroyed. So Arjuna, apart from all this dejection, the spirituality, that what you said, a higher law of action, etc., etc., that's one thing we have seen. But on the practical level, Arjuna was so proud of his Pandava clan. He had the clan mentality. And even everyone, Duryodhan and Dhritarashtra, everybody was a clan mentality there. So it may be that Pandavas were sort of the righteous people, but they were also unrighteous to the extent that they were stuck in the mentality of the clan. So for Sri Krishna, some Pandavas had to be destroyed and some Kauravas have to be destroyed, because both were living in the mindset of the clan. So you can see the practical reality why Sri Krishna came, took an avatar and did the social work. Normally, this is what happens when we think of an avatar, of an incarnation. He comes only for the big spiritual works, this new step in evolution and all that. And we tend to overlook the practical contribution they make to the times when they lived. What Muhammad did was similar thing. They were all small groups. Real tribes they are called. There was no nation. But what was the effect of Muhammad? He pooled all these tribes into a nationhood, or into, if not a big nation, into a bigger clan, if not the small tribes. So each of these avataric people, they contribute to the evolution of the social evolution, to the social evolution itself. So we have here, he is telling that Arjuna had forgotten about the good of India in considering the good of the Kuru family. He was preparing to throw away the right law for fear of unrighteousness. We all know that to kill one's brothers out of self-interest is a heinous sin. But it is a greater sin to be a party to bringing about a national calamity, to desist from doing good to one's nation out of love for one's brothers. You see the strong defense. That if, imagine at the time of Bengal Revolution, people said, we have this great heroes of Punjab who went to the guillotine. And if they said, no, I have a brother to look after, I have a sister to look after, my mother is not doing well, I'll not work for the country, a Bhagat Singh would never have been born. You see, these are the people who sacrificed their own family for the nation. So Sri Krishna is telling, if Arjuna was stuck in this belief that his clan, his Pitrus, his brothers, his uncles, they should survive and let India go to dogs, obviously Sri Krishna can't accept that. So that is why he is saying that is a greater heinous crime. If Arjuna gave up his arms, it would be a victory for the unrighteousness. Duryodhan would become the paramount king of India and the leading man in the whole country. He would, by his bad example, put a stain on the national character and the code of behavior of Kshatriya families. The strong and mighty Indian clans would turn to each other's destruction under the impulse of jealousy, self-interest and love of antagonism. There would be no undisputed state power guided by the rule of law to unify, govern and keep the country well defended by a concentration of power. You see, somebody should look into this historically, and in fact, recently I was in Singapore, I spoke about this. It awoke a lot of interest among the Indians. In fact, a couple of them came forward to say that we would like to. I said, look, I don't have historical evidence here, but what Sri Aurobindo is telling, it should be researched and seen what were the historical dangers that Sri Aurobindo is speaking of. He says, under such conditions, that foreign invasion, which even at that time was preparing like a sea held by the dikes to come upon India and inundate it, would, arriving before its time, have destroyed the Aryan civilization and rooted out all hopes of the future good of the world. The political upheaval that began in India 2000 years later on the fall of the empire set up by Sri Krishna and Arjuna would have commenced right then. So you see the main argument now, that if Arjuna did not fight, Duryodhana would have become the king, and then Duryodhana would have continued with his clan mentality, and he would have set a very bad example to the clans because of his jealousy and all that wrong nature and the bad nature. And because of that, India would have further weakened, because there would have been no strong good force. It would have been all the evil force. And that Sri Aurobindo is telling would have opened doors for a foreign invasion even in the time of the Mahabharata. That's something that at least I personally do not know. In Singapore, some people said, we'll look into it, sir. I think we'll take up a research work. I said, it's worth looking into, because Sri Aurobindo is telling that foreign invasion would have taken then, and the invasion that took later with the Mughals and with the Britishers and all that would have started then. And had this invasion taken then at the time of 2000 years or times of Mahabharata, the Aryan civilization would have been rooted out. So imagine India wouldn't be what it is today if there was no Kurukshetra. I am so flabbergasted by this simple essay here. I don't have time to look into, but I'm sure if some people work and give us the historic evidence of what Sri Aurobindo is telling us, it would open up a new chapter in our understanding of our own history and culture. So he says Aryan culture wouldn't have developed in the country. It would have been completely uprooted. So what Sri Krishna has done is not only, greater dharma, people may not understand, but on the political, social level, it is Sri Krishna who gave us the first nationhood. But remember, it did not realize as a nation, definitely. We know that very well. After the Pandavas, again the things broke up, again the small kingdoms came up and all that, till the great, in fact, he would say the last remnant of this great Sri Krishna's force was Rani Lakshmi Bai, Jhansi ki Rani. So that was the power of the Kshatriya that he released to defend one's own country. So of course, we know history, that all this failed, and therefore nature brought again an external force called the British Empire, who gave us back the nationhood. So you see, we historians, and especially the present people, the communist historians who have given history of the country, who dare not even look into what Sri Aurobindo wants to say, is a really false image of our own country's history. So there must be historians who take up these views and rewrite history. Well, one day it will happen. Truth cannot be hidden for long. So he would say that this is how Sri Krishna first gave the idea of the nation to India. Well, this is how nature works out. It implants the idea first, then it lets it work itself out, failure and success and all that. Hundreds of years go by, then it gets strengthened up and re-emerges. This has been the constant measure and rhythm of nature, how it works out itself in grand new ideas. So even this human unity, it was some time laid before, and then it comes out in the nature of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. So to continue that para, he would say, they say that the ills for fear of which Arjuna had raised those objections did actually come as a result of the Kurukshetra war. Well, I'll skip a couple of sentences to catch up with the same argument. Where the future of the whole country depended on the results of war, it had been unrighteous to desist from the war because it would lead to fratricide. The good of the family had to be submerged in the good of the nation, the good of the world. Brotherly affection and attachment to family ties could not justify the ruin of millions of people, a sacrifice of the future happiness or the amelioration of suffering of millions of people. That too would lead to perdition of the individual and the clan. So what Sri Aurobindo is arguing, if you think of your clan and if you want to save your clan, the whole Bharat would be suffering. And if Bharat suffers, if India suffers, then your own clan will perish. So you are not saving your country or you are saving your clan. So he's saying that there was a stage of going beyond your clanhood. That there was a ruin of the clans in the Kurukshetra war is also a fact. That all the clans were destroyed is a fact. As a result of this war, the families of the Kurus of great might practically disappear. But if by the disappearance of the Kuru people, the whole of India came to be saved, then the destruction of the Kurus meant not a loss, but a gain. I think you understand, it's very simple. Just as there is the blind attachment to family ties, so is there a blind attachment to the clan. Not to say anything to our fellow countrymen, not to oppose them, even though they may cause harm or be intent to kill, even though they cause the country's ruination, they are brothers, objects of affection, they should be borne in silence. This kind of unrighteousness born of the divine Maya, that posing as the right law makes us fall from a true understanding, is produced by the delusion of attachment to the clan. You see, this is a wonderful explanation which again gets repeated in our own independence and freedom movement of the country. To accept unrighteousness of the Britishers, saying, no, my brethren will get hurt, my Indians will get killed. You see how much of this suffering you are increasing by this attachment to the clan or by your people or by your Gujaratis or your Bengalis or by your Hindus. So this kind of an attachment is blindness, because what you are working for is a greater ideal of the nationhood. So he says this is the unrighteousness born of divine Maya. It is unrighteous to oppose or quarrel with a fellow countryman without cause, from self-interest or in the absence of dire need of utility, but to bear in silence the mischiefs of a fellow countryman. Try to understand it in the context of our independence movement, because it's closer to history. But to bear in silence the mischiefs of a fellow countryman who is determined to take the life of the common mother or to do her harm. To tolerate this matricide or that harmful act would be a still greater sin. When Shivaji set out to murder his countrymen who were partisans of the Mughals, if someone had said, "Lo, what is this you are doing? They are your own countrymen. Bear up with them in silence. If the Mughals occupy the Maharashtra country, let them do it. If Maratha loves Maratha, that will be enough." Would not these words appear entirely ridiculous? So when Sri Aurobindo was in Bengal, his group killed lots of Indians because they were working with the Britishers. They were working under the Britishers, harming their own mother country. So there's no question of saying, oh, we are Indians, let us not fight Indians. He says that is a ridiculous thing. When the Americans, in order to abolish slavery, created dissensions in the land and by starting a civil war took the lives of thousands of fellow citizens, were they doing wrong? It may so happen that civil strife and the slaughter of fellow citizens in battle are the only way to the good of the country and the good of the world. Wonderful example again. The American Civil War. At that time, if they said, no, we Americans should not kill the Americans, But had not the civil war taken place, America wouldn't be what it is today. So what Sri Aurobindo is telling, that there is a higher good. Out of that civil war was born the United States of America. So what Sri Aurobindo wants to say is, there is always the birth of a higher ideal, and at that altar, the lower can always be sacrificed, even though if it means killing of many people. Of course, the problem becomes complicated. If the good of the nation demand the preservation of the clan, in the age of the Mahabharata, the nation unit had not been established in India. Remember that. Everybody regarded the clan itself as the pivot of the human race. So that is one of the major problems we in India have at present. You see, Sri Aurobindo wrote this 100 years back, 97 years, 93 years back, or 97. But we are in the same mess. Because each one of us is a Gujarati or a Telugu or a Tamil or a Bengali or a Punjabi, but we are not Indians. We are still under the same clan mentality, my dear friends. I mean, look at ourselves. We are no better than the clans of Kurus and Kauravas. So really, is India a nation? The Britishers have left behind a nation. But this is what Sri Aurobindo had given in his message of 1947. Freedom is not sufficient. We must have unity. So today we are not united. We are still the same clans. Today, instead of calling Kauravas and clans, we call ourselves Tamil Nadu, we call ourselves Karnataka, and you see the fight that is going on in the waters. Kaveri waters, they kill each other. So where have we grown? We just have changed the nomenclature. Kauravas and Pandavas have become Andhrites and Keralites versus Bengalis, Bengalis versus Tamil Nadu people. So that weakness of the clan is still ingrained in our mind. That is the sorrow of our country. And that's where, we are born a nation politically, 1947. But we are not yet a nation psychologically. In Japan, nobody thinks of himself a Kyoto or a Tokyo person. He's a Japanese first and foremost and last. You see, this is the nationhood. The Americans are really proud of themselves. They are in Los Angeles or New York. They don't say, I'm a Western American or a Eastern American or Northern American. They're Americans. So this kind of a national feeling we don't have. Very unfortunately. And that has been the bane of the country last 3,000 years. So that's where, Sri Aurobindo's message holds so much of great importance even now. It was precisely because of this that men like Bhishma and Drona, who were steeped in the old tradition, fought against the Pandavas. You see, now we understand why Bhishma Pitama, the wisest person of the times, still he did not support Pandavas. Why? And Bhishma and Dronacharya, the great teacher of everybody, Kurus and Pandavas, because they were victims of this old traditional idea that clan is the superior thing, clan is next to God, and that must survive at whatever cost. So you see, clinging to this clanhood, what harm we bring to ourselves. If you fight Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, who is being destroyed? India is getting destroyed. We are not realizing that. So you see, each of these politicians, they really, they strangulate you. They make you smaller. They make you Karnatakas. They make you Andhras. They make you Tamilians. They make you Bengalis. There's not one politician giving us a vision that we are India. We are one country. Either state-wise we are divided, religion-wise we are divided, caste-wise we are divided. Everywhere the politicians bring us this division. So, they were aware that right was on the side of the Pandavas. They realized that to bind the whole of India around a single center through the establishment of an empire was a necessity. But they also knew that the clan alone was the pivotal point of the nation, and in it lay the foundations of the right law. To maintain the law and found a nation by destroying the clan was an impossibility. Arjuna too fell into that era. So I'm reading out this because you must all now open up with a new understanding and not go by those acharyas who have been explaining Bhagavad Gita, and with all due thanks to all of them. But a new vision, I mean, this is what we get on the social, political level, on the occult and spiritual level. That is what is the Gita. In this age, the nation is the foundation of the law, the pivot of human society. That we have seen. To preserve the nation is the primary duty of this age. To cause the ruin of the nation, the great unforgivable sin. So we are all great. We have achieved, at least I don't say we, by India, at least the world, the Europe, Americans, Far East, the Malaysians or the Singaporeans, they are all a nation. Except India, everyone else seems to be a big nation. So they are all defending the nation. Of course, we defend the nation only where there is a Chinese war or a Pakistan war. Rest of the time, we are all small clans under different names. So he says, to cause the ruin of the nation, the great unforgivable sin. But this is Sri Aurobindo. This is the work that Sri Aurobindo has come for. But there can possibly be the advent of an age when a great society of the nations can be established. A great society of the nations, like you have the European Union now. You have Pan America. So there, the great clusters of nations will be formed before a whole human unity is formed. So the first evidence of that cluster of nations is European Union. That's why he wrote about it in 1914, 1917. He used the same word, European Union. Europeans hardly ever read about that. But the phases that Sri Aurobindo described in that article in 1917-18, I don't know the exact year, but around that period, are exactly the same phases that Europe has gone through in its development and becoming a European nation. So that was the vision that Sri Aurobindo has given. If only we could read and follow that. And then he says, at that time, perhaps the world's eminent men of knowledge and action would take up arms in defense of the nation. And on the other side, Sri Krishna, as a maker of revolutions, would start a new Kurukshetra war and affect the good of the world. So if nations come together and they desist the birth of human unity, then he says Sri Krishna would come back again and fight a new Kurukshetra. Well, we have a new Sri Krishna here, Sri Aurobindo, who has taken up the battle against these nations. So that is why Sri Aurobindo perhaps was so keen to give India its freedom, because he saw that nation must be born. Otherwise, India as a clan cannot be leading the world. So in fact, just today I came across a quotation. Somebody quoted a personal letter, because I have not read that letter in the publications, where somebody was arguing about the conditions of the world and about the conditions of India, etc. He said, yes, I know what it was 4th April 1950, imagine, as late as that. The wars were over and the chaos had begun. 1947, India was born. And then he says, I know what is happening to the country. And he also said, there will be a lot more problems for the country. Many more problems, lot more suffering. 1950 he said that. And yet he said, I am not the one to lose hope that India will go through all this and be the leader of humanity. In 1950 he says this, just then we got the freedom. Pakistan and India, blood was still hot out of the great wars, the partition. But here was a man who could foresee through all these troubles that there is a destiny of the country. So he said, that is the destiny. If India is to be the leader of the world, then he knew first it has to be as a nation. So you see, he pushed this evolution through the stages. He did not make India suddenly a guru of the world. He said, no, first you become the nation. And for which he put in his own great blood and sweat and everything. So he fought so many years, gave the best time of his life. Then when he knew that India would be born as a nation, Then he came to Pondicherry. Then he said, I'll go to the next step. So he contributed his efforts to give the birth of the country, and then he went beyond India. So it is wrong to say, hey, why did Sri Aurobindo come back to the politics of the country? For him, India was a nation. Now he had to look into the interests of the world. So he worked for it from Pondicherry for the next evolutionary step. So what Sri Aurobindo writes here, that at the same time perhaps the world's eminent men of knowledge and action would take up arms in defense of the nation. So today, if people are proud of being a nation and want to defend the nationhood, it's a wrong principle. You can be a nation, but you have to become into that group of nations. So that movement is the right movement. Any other movement is a wrong track. So Europe, as ever, as always, it has received a new light. Because does not the mother say that Europe's mind is very open to the new? And that's what I see, what Sri Aurobindo had written, Europe has received, has concretized. Whereas the other countries want to be themselves and make themselves more powerful and more strong, and more military, more strong. But that is against the flow of evolution. And those countries will go down in evolution. So if India is coming out of its boundaries to have a partnership with America, to partnership with Russia, a partnership with China, this is the right movement to grow beyond the nationhood, be part of the world human unity. How it will happen? Of course, Sri Aurobindo did even write the dangers of this European Union, the clashes of one union versus another union. There could be one Asiatic Union with this, with Singapore and Malaysia and all the small countries, Korea, South and North and all that, what they call the Bangkok, etc. One Asiatic Union, European Union, American Union, then South Asia Union. There will be all these unions born. And these unions, again, they will go through a long period of clashes and adjustments and creativity. And then would finally emerge the human unity. And all this, Sri Aurobindo gave us 100 years back. Crystal clear, explained. That's why, friends, you read Sri Aurobindo, you read the future of mankind. That's why, my devotion is different. I will not speak about it. But a man with such a fantastic vision and such an impersonal person, he was not an Indian, he was not a Bengali. He really belonged to humanity. In his vision, in his action, in his force. So he is that universal consciousness. So when we read him, we say, wow, this is man and this is mankind. Well, and that's why I feel so privileged, so very privileged that we are given the opportunity to read and to understand. Well, that is coming to the end of this chapter 5, but tomorrow we'll take up the next chapter, chapter 6.